All right. Is that visible?
Yes, now, yes.
All right. I'll be presenting the topic harnessing the key driver for decarbonization in Nigeria. It's strategies for a sustainable and resilient energy future. So I'd just like to note I'm here to represent the MD CEO, Engineer Ahmad Salihijo, who has been doing a tremendous job in terms of driving renewable energy adoption in the country. So please hold on. Yeah. So this is what I will be presenting. The introduction to the REA, my profile, give an overview of the energy situation in the country and the policy framework. I'll also delve a little bit into the renewable energy sources in Nigeria and the applications. And then I'll finally go into challenges and recommendations, close out with capacity building and research. Sorry, it's a little bit slow, yes. So can you see my slide?
Yes, we can, sir.
So of course, I have to start from the REA. The REA is a federal government agency under supervision of the Federal Ministry of Power, and it's largely mandated in improving electrification of the off-grid sector through mini grids and extension of the national grid. It's also in doing this, it does it through the promotion of renewable energy and through facilitating public-private partnerships and empowering the community so that there is some kind of social economic development in these areas. And of course, finally, we will also be monitoring these activities that we're doing to provide the progress and the impacts of the activities of the agency, and also generally the partners to the government and to Nigerians in doing this. So in summary, the area is very pivotal in extending electricity access to rural areas, promoting sustainability, and the decarbonization efforts. So I would also like to highlight some of the achievements or the impacts of the REA over the last 5 years. The area has installed more than 160 megawatts of clean energy capacity in the country. Actually, if you include grid extensions, which we are not calling green right now, majorly more than 860 megawatts. We work across every single state in the country, and we've affected more than 7.8 million people in Nigeria. We've also had some consideration in terms of gender mainstreaming, where we are targeting female-led businesses and female-led households for that support. And of course, the highlight with respect to this presentation is that over these 5 years, we have done over 1.6 million tons of CO2 equivalent reduction in emissions. So I think we're on the path, and this is the impact that we done, and we look to do much more going forward. So this is just a quick profile of myself. I won't dwell on it as the presenter has already given that profile. So I'd like to start in earnest in terms of providing an overview of the energy situation of the country. Nigeria is very resource rich. However, if you look at our energy mix, and when I say energy, I don't mean the power sector alone, I mean the entire energy. Nigerians still largely rely on solid biomass and waste, and they burn this inefficiently, which contributes a lot to carbon emissions. The remaining balance is largely oil and natural gas, which are also contributors to carbon emissions. And our only clean source, majorly of significant input, is hydro, which is about 1% of what Nigeria is doing. If you look at the second table, with respect to the area and its mandate of energy access, Nigeria is largely about 60% access to the grid, and most of this access is in the urban areas. You find out that majority of the rural areas don't have access to electricity services, or they are underserved. In terms of policy, Nigeria has a national energy policy of 2003, which emphasizes on exploiting all our energy resources. And specifically to the REA, there are elements there about developing and incorporating renewable energy into our electrification strategy. This policy is quite old, but my information is that this policy is also under review to update it with the current realities. This is over 20 years since that first policy was drafted and approved. So if you look at it, Nigeria has an abundance of hydro resources, over 15,000 megawatts of hydro capacity. However, less than 2,000 has been utilized. As I've said earlier, Nigerians use a lot of biomass. However, we use it in its most pollutive forms. Nigeria has some wind potential, especially towards the north of the country. It hasn't been utilized much. The only commercial scale application has been the Katsina wind farm. However, even that has not been successfully integrated into the national grid yet. In terms of solar, everybody knows Nigeria is abundantly blessed with solar resources. And finally, we also have a long coastline down in the southern part of Nigeria, and this is also potential area for utilizing renewable energy resources. So these renewable energy resources, they're typically used, in terms of solar. You can use them for water pumping, for refrigeration, and for, of course, powering communities. And with biomass, we need to actually work more on efficient biomass stoves, that's clean cooking, and also biodigesters to utilize a lot of our agricultural wastes in the country. Wind typically can be used for also water supply, but also for electricity generation. Finally, we have the large hydros, which large and small hydros. The small hydros have largely been underdeveloped, but we feel these can also be used for community power and also agricultural purposes. With regards to the challenges in terms of implementing decarbonization projects, there's quite a lot of technical challenge. You find that we have to bring a lot of foreign technical competence to deploy projects. So this is quite a challenge, and also technical capacity. The number of qualified staff to do these things are quite low in the country. There's also, of course, economic challenges. If you realize Nigeria has the highest number of poor people in the world. So this, of course, makes it difficult to make financially viable projects, and also access to capital is quite a problem, even for our corporate bodies. Then, of course, in terms of policy and what government is doing, sometimes there's low implementation of the policies that we do have, and a lot of times Nigerians are not aware of even the policies that are available. So, recommendations based on all these challenges. I think obviously improving the policies in Nigeria to support decarbonization is very important. Sometimes these policies or agents of government usually implement policies that are counterproductive. For example, you could find that the government is saying solar equipment will be import duty exempted. However, you still find that the customs and the Ministry of Finance may not follow up on that policy. So there needs to be some kind of harmonization and improvement of the policy. Of course, we need to also improve our data, as somebody is going to talk about it, to have data readily available for people to work with. Another thing that is very important is the use of productive use in renewable energy projects, which will allow these projects to have more economic impact, socio-economic impact. Of course, increase in demonstration projects to show that these projects work is also really important for helping people understand. Another thing that helps in terms of technical capacity is establishing standards so that we make maintenance easier and scaling up to also be easier for projects. Of course, we need to leverage the global partnerships. We've seen the COPs happen. We've seen all the various forums. We need to leverage all these partnerships to improve the decarbonization agenda. And of course, the final thing is to make available funding mechanisms that are make it easy for people to deliver on their projects. I think finally is just to talk about capacity building in terms of providing people with the right capacity to deliver on these projects, and also to do more research in terms of localizing a lot of these technologies and ensure that they're adequate for our own local environment. In conclusion, I mean, renewable energies, we need to think about it more strategically and move towards the use of innovative technologies and collaborate better in terms of unlocking these potentials and decarbonizing the future for ourselves and for our future countrymen. Thank you, everyone. I hope I was very clear. As the moderator, I'm open for questions, but I'm sure maybe it will be done at the end of the presentations. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Engineer Diko. What a rich presentation. I like your closing thoughts, why you emphasized on capacity building and research availability. It's a very, very it's an important part of this conversation. If we really are going to the right path, capacity development and research is a vital part of this future we are discussing. So with your closing remark, I'm going to bring in our next speaker. Our focus is more on data. She's worked massively in that space. She's an architect by training, and I believe we really bring a lot from our wealth of knowledge. Please welcome with me for the next presentation, architect Oluyemisi Awoni. Let me mention also, for your question and answer, please just go to the Q&A tab, type in your questions. All questions will be taken together after presentation. We welcome you, architect Oluyemisi Awoni. You have the floor now. We can see your slide, but we haven't started hearing you. If your mic is on mute, you kindly unmute and you have the floor. Thank you, Architect Janice.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, live and direct, clearly.
Okay. Sorry. All right. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about the role of data in decarbonizing Nigeria's built environment. I'll be talking briefly about built environment, what is required in decarbonizing it, and the role of data and what the Green Building Council is also coming up with. As we all know, there is a global need for decarbonization. We see the effects of climate change all around us. We have rising temperatures, changing rainfall patterns, increasing levels, sea levels, among other effects of climate change. Different governments are rushing to put in plans, um, things that would help to limit the effects of climate change, and Nigeria is no exception. We need to, get on board on this reduction of emissions and things that cause climate change. Is very important. Nigeria's population has been projected to increase from 220 million that it is today to about 400 million by 2050. This is a lot of implications for us. It means that building stock is going to increase. It means that there's going to be a doubling of the built environment footprint, the carbon footprint of our buildings. And when we are talking about the built environment, we're not just even talking about buildings alone, but everything that is associated with building. So there's going to be additional energy resources. The last speaker talked about renewable energy resources, and we know that these things are going to, the need for more energy is going to be very pertinent. So for us to decarbonize, definitely we need to build less. As much as possible, we need to avoid new constructions. If we are going to be serious about this decarbonization effort, then we need to start asking ourselves for every project that is coming on board, is it necessary? This building, can we have alternatives to it? Is it possible to make use of an existing building or to refurbish an existing building instead of coming up with a new building? These are some of the things. And for us to take these effective decisions, we need to have data. Data is what will back it up. Data is what will drive our efforts. Data is going to give us a very good understanding of where we are, how far we have come, and then to be able to set goals. If we are saying, okay, by 2015, by 2050, we have set the goal of net target electricity, net zero, then data is going to drive that effort. Also, we need to build efficiently. How do we build efficiently using low carbon materials? There are alternatives, and for the different alternatives that there are, we must understand what are the what's the emissivity of this material, what's the carbon, what's the data on it for everyone, for all the stakeholders, the designers, the architects, the engineers, everyone that is a stakeholder in the building industry must understand the different factors, the different data that relate to the different materials that are available in the market. Also, we need to build smarter using new construction technology that are environment friendly. Also, the building demands, there's a lot of energy that is used up by our buildings. When we have occupants in buildings, we do a lot of air conditioning and all of that. How much energy are we using in each of our buildings? These are questions that we need to begin to ask ourselves. Do we have smart meters that can give us information on how much energy? How can we drive reduction of energy consumption in our buildings? Is data that would give us all this information. The efficiency of the building envelope also has to be reduced. We have to improve the efficiency of the building envelope. How do we ensure that people are thermally satisfied, they have thermal comfort within their buildings, and also the building is still efficient in itself? Also, energy supply to buildings, we need to start thinking of renewable energy renewable energy resources to buildings, and how to decarbonize that energy supply, and, so that we can achieve net zero electricity. So for us to do all of this, there is a critical role that data plays. What data would do is to help us to identify the potential areas of improvement. Okay, when we have data that is readily available, then we can begin to look at the different areas of improvement on the city and national level emissions. It would also provide information on the carbon embedded in Nigeria building materials, on our own locally available materials and products, as well as processes, to give us the information embedded in the different materials available. Also, it's going to help to develop appropriate strategies and policies. It will help government to develop appropriate strategies and policies. Also, data is very useful in helping us to calculate the associated costs, because we need to have an idea of cost. Cost would help us to determine, okay, let's go for this. This is not going to work. Is this cement? Is it, the different materials are available, the different production processes. When we have a good understanding of the associated costs, we'll be able to take informed decisions. Also, it will drive research and innovation for those that are in academia and for those that are in research institutes. Data is what will drive research and innovation. So what the Green Building Council has come up with is that there's a proposal to have a Nigeria Built Environment carbon database, which is like a centralized repository of carbon assessment that would quantify for us the energy efficiency and emissions of buildings and other infrastructures. What the database will do for us is to provide like a standard methodology. It's going to be like a crowd-funded source of data in which organizations can quantify their carbon footprint, and we can begin to benchmark and compare and have information on the available data. Also, this database will be a valuable resource to researchers, policymakers, and other stakeholders in the fight against climate change. It's going to help us to track emissions and also be able to follow up and the performance targets and the progress made on reducing emissions. So ways in which these database can be applied includes low carbon design and construction. Definitely for us to decarbonize, we need to begin to think seriously about low carbon design and construction. Every stakeholder within the construction industry needs to be able to take informed decisions from even before we move to site. From the design stage, we need to be able to take informed decisions about selection of low carbon materials and systems, and to minimize, which will all help in the minimization of the carbon emissions throughout the life cycle. Because the truth of the matter is, throughout the life cycle of buildings, buildings contribute to carbon emissions from construction through use to demolition and disposal. So when we start looking at low carbon design and construction, data is what will drive all of these efforts. It's also going to help us in tracking the decarbonization progress. When we have a built environment carbon database, it's going to help us to develop carbon budgets and to track progress towards carbon reduction targets that we have. Also, it's going to help with benchmarking and comparison. The data from the built environment carbon database will help us to benchmark. We'll have standards. Okay, we can say, oh, this particular office building that was built in UAE, this is how much carbon that was emitted on this. This is the carbon footprint for the building. So that means that if I, as an architect, am going to design a similar building, I can use that to benchmark, and then we can have information on different buildings that we have, and we can be able to compare the performance of different structures that are on ground. So what data will also do for us is to help to drive policy development. Last speaker talked about policies that governments have. We definitely need to have policies in place that would would help us to work towards the decarbonization of our environment. And governments and other stakeholders need this data to inform the regulations that will reduce carbon emissions from buildings and infrastructure. So last but not the least, is going to help with financing and insurance. Lenders and insurance need data to assess the carbon risk of buildings and also, offer products that would help to incentivize low carbon practices. And also it would help in massive awareness. The average man on the street needs to understand the carbon impact that they have. And then everyone, building owners, all stakeholders need to understand the carbon footprint of buildings and how very, very important it is to adopt low carbon practices. Thank you very much. I'm also open to questions and
Thank you, Akite Luyemisi. Thank you for your great presentation. I find some thoughts fascinating anyway. Maybe it's not for now. Please let me also remind us, if there are questions and answers as we have the presenter present, kindly just type them in the Q&A chat box. We'll be able to attend to them afterwards. Now, a wise man once said, if you want to travel fast, travel with someone, especially someone that has told that path before. So that means instead of Google Map, of course, Google Map was done.
Emmanuel, you muted yourself.
I mean, for example, for someone that said we are look at the ideal, we are look at where we are, we are look at where we should be. Now we want to now compare notes with someone that had led a team that have told that path before. So he will be discussing with us how the Mauritius Council and the professionals in that country All right, Tony, can you hear me? It's your turn now.
Yeah, I can hear you, but I couldn't hear you. Hi, everyone. Yes, so I've got a couple of slides, but I'm going to share with you. I'm Tony. I'm very happy to be here. Greetings, everyone, from Mauritius. Yeah, so let me just find the sharing of the screen. I'm going to talk to you more about the process, really. We've listened to some of our different colleagues speaking about the context, and my colleague talking about data. I just want to speak about the approach we have taken to develop a roadmap, the national roadmap, and also a couple of components of it. Let me just find this window. There we go. Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yes, now we can.
Okay. So for us, the approach what we've taken was that we do understand, first we need to understand what are the different components for net zero. And from this, we took the IEA roadmap, which was done some time back. And this slide actually comes from one of the net zero program from World Green Council, Jorge. he extracted this graph, and I'm just showing you that graph, showing what are the different measures. As you see in 2020, as we move to 2030, there will be a 29% increase. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
you can. Please
Okay,
go
great.
ahead. Yes.
So basically, that is the minimum things we can do. And all these are the different components that will help us to reduce our carbon emission. And the different measures, you'll see what we can do. One is about behavior and avoided demand. The second is energy efficiency. We spoke about that. Electrification, moving away from burning things, and hydrogen base, bioenergy, which we talk about biomass, but more in less polluting way, and renewables. So basically, these are the different fraction, but percentage, but we need to be looking at, but we're going to move a dial to get us to the net zero in 2050, and these are the different shares of it, and so this is the first thing. And then the second thing, what was important in that roadmap, sorry, the slide you can't really read, but in 2025 there'll be no new sales of fossil fuel systems. And in 2030, there's beginning to universal energy access, and all new buildings will be net zero carbon ready. In 2035, most appliances and cooling system will be best in class, meaning the most efficient. And then this is what 2035, yeah. So one is 20. I think there's a mixed up in terms of years. So it's just 2040. 50% of existing buildings, that's 2025, yeah. 50% of existing buildings need to be retrofitted to be zero carbon ready levels. And then 2045, 50% of energy demand heating demand will come from heat pumps. And obviously you can see how biased it is, because that's more like Northern Hemisphere terminology. And in 2050, more than 85% of buildings are zero carbon ready. So the question would be, what is zero carbon ready? So this is the next slide. Zero carbon ready buildings a zero carbon ready building is a climate resilient, grid responsive, meaning it can communicate with the grid and we can exchange information, highly energy efficient, but is open to what highly energy efficient mean, and either uses renewable energy directly or uses an energy supply that will be fully decarbonized by 2050. They ensure comfort and safety of the occupants. And then we look also at for the existing building, but they either a low carbon retrofit or when needed, built with low upfront carbon materials. And they are managed by entities that procure renewable energy or have compensated any remaining emissions. So we thought about this and we say, okay, we do have some of these objectives that we need to achieve. We do understand what is net zero. We do understand carbon. But then actually, how do we do that is more the question, because it's more about the process, more about how we get there. We can set, strategy. Okay, let's be net zero by 2050. But then, how do we do that? So this is the main thing, setting an objective, setting targets is very easy, but then, how to get to these targets and to achieve these goals is actually more of a question. So what I'm going to share with you is more about how we've done it here. And as you know, most of the national strategies, they are done by government, but we see also like civil society taking the lead in a few things, like for example, having like this sort of observatory that my colleague just mentioned, from the Green Building Council of Nigeria is taking to gather data. So we decided in Mauritius also to spearhead the national net zero roadmap. So we've done that by calling different stakeholders around the table, including government, private sector, academia, civil society, etc. and we got everyone in a room, the key stakeholders, and we started doing some working sessions. So the process of a development of roadmap, we did with stakeholders mapping. So we identified who are actually the stakeholders. We asked the people, who actually you think are the stakeholders around this issue to the net zero. And once we defined that, and the next session we invited these different stakeholders and we asked them, like my colleague earlier has explained what IRA is doing, because a lot of time we don't know who's doing what, in the ecosystem, and we thought we have to bring everyone to speed and to know who is doing what first. So we mapped the stakeholders, we mapped what they were doing, we invited all different stakeholders to say, okay, there's the National Energy Strategy and the Mauritius Renewable National Agency, we're doing this, and academia, we're doing that, we're producing this, private sector will say, we actually trying to do this, and this is our problem, etc. So basically we gather information from the stakeholders first. Then we said, okay, we got all of the people around the table, what would be now the barriers? What do you think for a net zero roadmap to achieve? What are the targets, say, by percentage, in terms of doubling, like our aspiration for energy efficiency, like happening COP now, etc. That we can set. But when we say, okay, what are the different barriers to that? And I'll show you a couple of examples of the barriers. Lots of people talk about cost, lack of awareness, lack of finance, lack of available and suitable technology, out of context solutions, lack of policy regulation, lack of political will, lack of national cohesive plan, brown mindset of people want to keep a business as usual, lack of collaboration, lack of pressure from supply chain, people are not convinced, etc., etc. So all of these things came up in terms of, I'll just give you an example there. And when we say, okay, we've got these barriers now, what will be the solutions to that? So in this session, we came out with the different solutions, and it's government incentives, change of mindset, capacity building, tax relief, etc., etc., and modular construction, all of the things. We crowdsource all information from the different stakeholders. So once we got that, we said, okay, we've got some idea of solutions. Let's have another session to do the roadmap. And to do the roadmap, we need to understand and categorize and cluster the issues or the different, what we call the levers of change in terms of defining a roadmap. And we came up with 5 levers of change. It's like finance. It's like how we do address finance in terms of this. So we will then, in that session, we develop short-term, medium-term, and long-term actions regarding finance. That would be, for example, provide tax incentives for net zero green projects, ask partnership with green finance with the banks to be able to deploy these finance to the projects. And then we look also at technical solutions, because a lot of time we are actually doing like we used to do, and we're not actually using new technologies, etc., because we just used to do things a certain way. And as you know, the building industry is the most sort of less innovative in a sense, relatively, because we're still building the same way we've been building for hundreds of years. And so how do we tackle, bring technical solutions in the roadmap, and what will be the actions under technical solution with the same, short term, medium term, and long term? And then data, my colleague earlier has expressed what you're doing around data. It's a similar thing. We need data to be able for us to see where we're going, where we are, and to understand, to build business models around things, to connect financial instruments to our initiatives. So these also the same thing, to have an observatory, the data observatory regarding everything related to net zero projects, buildings, energy efficiency, etc. Government leadership is the next lever. So it's government interventions, like such as regulations, so as like fiscal incentives, policies, etc., which is very important because, like you've seen the solution, a lot of them said, government. We turn to government to help us, to get where we need, and we need to lead by example. We need to put all these different good framework for people to start, achieving, driving towards net zero. And then finally, it was touched about also is capacity building. And how do we build capacity within our country to understand what is net zero, to understand carbon, to understand, what is green finance, how to access green finance, how to evaluate a green project before we give money, for example. All of these things we've set up, and that's what actually created a roadmap. The roadmap was done, and it's currently under like a draft format now. So then we, the Green Building Council, with our different stakeholders who've been in the working session, will provide this roadmap, and we present it to the different stakeholders. And then the next part of it would be, once we've done that, we've got our roadmap, then we have these different actions, we need to then define who actually will be doing what. So yeah, I didn't want to show you, you can see all these different roadmaps all around the world, all the different things. I just wanted to change the focus a little bit, because a lot of time we look at, what we should do, etc., and we don't really look, what needs to be done was to get to where we need to be. And I wanted to spend my time with you today to just, speak about the process rather than, how to make a building energy efficiency. I'm sure, there's different expert in this in the audience now knows much better than me how to make a building energy efficient and or renewable energy. So yeah, so that is it for me, and what I wanted to share with you. And once our roadmap with a little document be ready, and each step of the way we've been actually documenting whatever the working session outcome was. We've documented, what have different stakeholders mentioned, what they were doing or what they're planning to do. And this also help in terms of what we talk about a lot. It's about collaboration, getting everyone together, talking about a specific issue like driving net zero for the construction industry, gets people closer, get them talking, exchanging, knowing each other. And I think this is also very, very important in terms of like initiating a roadmap and implementing a roadmap. It's the people factor, getting all the different stakeholders to be, to acquaint with each other, and then to be, So then there are different collaboration that happen, different partnerships already. People don't know the X company or organization existed. So this is also, the benefit of the process. So I think I'll stop there, and I hope that you found this useful, and I'm open to questions afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tony. Such a rich thoughts, and we thank you so much for your time and for taking time to put this together. I mean, across board, what we are seeing is capacity, what we are seeing is policy, what we are seeing is people waking up to see that's the future of the built environment. Now, from the country of Mauritius, East Africa, now we're going to North Africa to compare notes and see if some of these conversations is the same. We have, of course, a rich team of panelists here, and I'm also happy to welcome our next speaker. I read her profile earlier, and she will be speaking to us. Just a minute, let me check a topic, of course, on what they have done also in Tunisia. So welcome with me in Saf as she shares her thoughts and some of the exploits and the things they did in Tunisia to put them on the pathway that they have today. Because for us, we want to learn, we want to glean, we also want to ask questions. Then afterwards, again, let me mention, if you have questions, kindly be kind enough to us to put it on the Q&A chat box, We'll be answering all your questions after the last presentation. So INSAF welcome you to this webinar. Kindly go ahead and present your thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, everyone, for having me with you today. I would also talk about Africa, as mainly I participated in co-authoring the African chapter for the Global GCR report. And also, this is also part of my field of work, in particular, working on bridging the gap between civil society, public sector, industrial, and government entities. And of course, I would be in a certain moment in alignment with the previous speakers in terms of opportunities and challenges that we are facing in the building and construction sector. Just to highlight that there is a huge disparities in terms between countries and also within one country between regions. We cannot really keep up I totally understand the political, let's say, side of talking about decarbonization. And of course, we all the time need roadmaps, and we need, of course, action plan to be able to track transformations and to be able as well, to develop projects and to go towards action. Because I think the most highlighted issue the recent decade was the huge gap in terms of action. There is a lot, of course, of improvement and development concerning, the tools, the roadmaps, the shifting in paradigms, and so forth. The only issue is about how far these, let's say, transformations and tools and roadmaps have reached the global, let's say, actors and stakeholders. This is, of course, I would bring that Africa, of course, is 54 countries where they will be facing huge changes in the, in the future. But it's one of the continent that has the highest index and physical one about vulnerability for climate change. This is something very important to know. It's something also that we need to highlight, that 80% of those living in rural sub-Saharan Africa lack access to electricity and lack access to basic urban services, and they lack access to affordable housing and, of course, infrastructure. This leads the saying that thinking that we will keep our existing stock and decarbonizing it will be some kind of, not rooted into the reality. 70% of the African building stock is still has to be built. And this is when I say that, and I can give you a figure to imagine the challenge that we are facing, is actually we need to build cities every 3 weeks in some of, African cities. And of course, some of you now, when you're listening to me, they said, all right, this is not possible. In reality, it's not possible through the mechanisms and the way how the building sector and construction has been thought, has been developed, has been, also taught in our, different institutions. And this is here I brought the aspect of the academia, because we have been not changing our way of thinking about, the construction professionals since more than 150 years. This means that at the same time, we are not even capable of realizing that and seeing it, actually, these disparities, but at the same time, in a very simple metaphoric, figures, what it needs to be done. This means it's not something that to be taken as a critique. It's something to be taken as a challenge and as a also awareness that we can't do it by ourselves. And this is here I join, for example, Tony, when he's talking about participatory approach and about mobilizing, the different stakeholders, because we talk a lot about of course, this is what actually Global ABC trying to do, even though they don't reach the 100%, is how to mobilize all the different stakeholders, and that they actually meet, and that they actually listen to each other, and they actually have some kind of consensus, taking into account the different interests of each stakeholder. And one of the stakeholders that is all the time missing in Africa, because all the time we have this top-down Western paradigms, that we don't take it into account the population. In reality, the building stock and the construction are being built, are being provided, but they are not fulfilled or supported by, let's say, officialized or formal sector. And that means that one of the things to be done is how to be able to map all the stakeholders on a local level, on a regional level, and on a national level. How we will be able to develop a framework of participation and involvement and engagement strategy to keep up this engagement and this sharing knowledge brokering and intermediation of these all technologies, tools, and so on, to have every time an updated vision, acknowledging at the same time, you know, the continuous actions toward it. And this is combining the formal and the informal at the same time. Something that is very crucial in the African context, and even talking now, even through the Q&A session, we can go deeper, into details, that they are the youth in Africa, they are the driver of change. And the youth are not really taking so much, you know, support in terms of finance, in terms of opportunities to innovate in the urban sector and the construction sector. They are not having access to the new tools for integrated planning, for complex thinking, for being able to be a great, you know, leaders, whether they are occupying public sector or private sector or civil society. And of course, there is no efficient collaboration that's taking place. So the fact is that whether we are seeing all these sectors, here we are talking really that everything is connected, and we need really a cultural shift, and we need really to go down a little bit to the bottom-up part, where we are capable of having this dialogue and this consensus and building this vision. And of course, to do that, there are new professionals that are missing. Even though we are talking here about already a deficiency in terms of capacity building, there are new professionals also that are missing, the facilitators, where most of the architects today occupying this role. There is a huge, you know, awareness about local skills and about the knowledge that communities held, especially in terms of, you know, local materials, local construction techniques, indigenous knowledge, which is one of the key major, you know, let's say, solutions for decarbonization. And at last, and I can go further toward this, that we need also to redefine decarbonization within our own local context. It's true that these, for myself, I can see them that they are very useful tool. They are really shovel, how we call it, shovel project or ready-made project that we can use. We can really take for granted the different standardized contracts and technologies, but we have to acknowledge that we need to adapt them, and we need to listen, and we need to know that we won't be able to achieve that if the population is not taking part of it. It's an impossible equation. They are the builders, they are the auto construction is one of the key major, you know, some of professional will think about it as a threat, while in reality it embed within very high processes and very adaptive and very resilient. And I think this needs to be, you know, taking into consideration in that shift. So I will stop here, but we can really, of course, through the Q&A questions, go really more into the details of how it is it's being done, because this is also, of course, there is a lot of great things happening in many African cities. In terms also of data, there is a lot of territorial banks of data that are done on a street level and street mapping using really very high open source also technologies. But the only thing is about how we can share that, how we will be able to upscale it, and how we will be able to channel the right resources and the right leadership to the right people, right context, right situation. Something else, talking about architecture or so on, many people would not know that in many countries in Africa, we lack tremendously innovation in the academia. And we still really very behind in terms of the practice. We don't no longer talk really about architects or talking about, there are other professions that emerge that they are adapted to the complexity of today's world. And of course, we need to find these people occupying other roles within their community leadership. We need them to be close to the context. We need them to be outside into into action. And this is for myself. I see it's a challenge for Africa, and it's an opportunity as well. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Insa, for that great insights and for some challenging thoughts. Listening to you on one side, it sounds to us like you are throwing stone on our local context. Of course, I can feel your thoughts. I can really look at what you're saying. I mean, standing from where you work from Global Alliance context, I know you can see all the data and know that we still have a lot of gap in Nigeria. Thank you once again, all the panelists. While we quickly now go to the Q&A, I know we have some questions already. And again, if you haven't asked a question, please do well to stipulate on board. I'm not sure the time we have left can allow us to answer all the questions. However, we'll make an attempt and attend to as many as we can. Now, from the general Q&A platform, I think I will first of all want architect Yemisi to respond to two questions together. Now, the first question from let me see, a name is there, Victor Akime, is asking the role of data. How do you think? Okay, yes. While you present, you presented on the role of data in decarbonizing Nigeria built environment. How do you think this data can be collected and collated for use in carbon transaction? I mean, very, very interesting question. Of course, let me try and ask. He said, how do you think the data can be collected and collated for use, not just for use in designing, but for use in carbon transaction? Wow, what a technical question. So actually, let me see. I think that question is for you. You can go ahead now.
Thank you very much. Just like I said earlier, data is life, data is necessary, and then to collate and collect them, I think that it's a collaborative effort by every stakeholder in the industry, everyone, both the designers and the practitioners in the field. We all have to come together and just, create a think tank of how we can bring all of these together. I think that it's important that we have verifiable data and credible sources of data that we can put out there. We can, for those that are in the academia, for instance, I mean, they can publish in journals, and we can have all of these data put together and put in a database where we can all access it. Thank you.
Can I jump in just to add on what my colleague have just said? I think that
yes, please do.
Yes,
please do. Instead.
Yes, so today we live in an era of data, right? And one of the challenges is the accessibility of this data. If I take, for example, the context of Tunisia, we found out that most of the institutional governmental entities have their internal data collection and data set, data library. And we found out that it's very hard for some professional and any type of stakeholder to access this data. This highlights a few challenges. One is how we will be able to make in a way that these data is shared. This data is also evaluated, is also tracked, and at the same time being able to advance this data to be able, using of course, the current technology to cross-cut data and to develop scenarios. These elements exist, and there were a lot of talk and also even World Bank financed project in terms of developing territorial, let's say, platform for or library for data. Okay, the only part in that is how to bring that again on a larger scale. And here we go back to the fact that the observatory, are either not existing in some countries, or they do exist, but they doesn't have the capacity and the legitimacy to control the overall process. Because when we talk about the data, it could be very good to find data. That's fine. It's amazing. But the fact is we don't have, the real mechanism to make this data available, shared, but at the same time, efficient. Because it doesn't give us any reading or any values towards taking decisions. And this is, we can see it very clearly today. If you open, for example, the internet and you check, for example, some percentage or let's say number of population for any countries, you will end up having disparities depending on the source that we are reading. And that's why we have for example, the platforms of Africapolis, for instance, which try to bring this, to bridge this gap and to find, a common platform where people and users can access this data whenever they need. So this is what I wanted to add on the question.
Thank you, Insa. Thank you for that thought. While I agree, I think crowdsourcing is usually what you are trying to point attention to. Well, of course, it is on ups and downs. Thank you for that. I mean, crowdsourcing is what will really solve some of the problem we have in data across all commercial practice engagement. Now, there's a part two to that question there, and that part two is really also important to me. The person said, how do you collect it for use in carbon transaction? I mean, I would want Nadiko to attempt that. Now, maybe if I understand what the person is asking for or asking about. Now, looking at the carbon footprint data, some of the ones I've seen, Nigeria is not even among the first 40 globally with industry and massive footprint of machinery and this and that. However, we are also in it. Now, again, with the recent development, with purchasing green power possibilities across some part of Africa, across Europe, across North America, with the possibility of purchasing carbon offset, with the possibility of renewable energy certificates. I mean, because if we also don't think about how can we incentivize this practice or this carbon footprint, we will not also get a lot of encouraging pathway for professionals. So I want Nadiko to speak to this. I know that the where it works, they've done a lot of installations across solar system across some rural environment space in Nigeria. Now the question from this question is asking is that how do you make money from focusing on renewable energy as a means of carbon offset? And again, maybe to add to that person's thought, how do you from Nigeria participate in being able to convert your renewable energy solution to some sort of renewable energy certificate, some sort of carbon offset documentation, some sort of green power purchase, so that at least you can know that, okay, if I'm actually investing in this, I can make this money back, even if I'm selling this back. So, Nadiko, would you want to give us a thought or maybe tell us about what you have done, or if it's possible with your Nadiko, can you hear us? So maybe if you can't hear us, maybe we can get Tony to respond to this. So Tony, this person that was asking about carbon offset data collection system is also keen about how does it translate to money. How do you talk about purchasing clean power, carbon offset, renewable energy, and have you done something like that in Mauritius? Is it something that is possible for us to replicate in Nigeria? What are the things that we need to do? I think Tony can help us to attempt this question.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. No, we don't have any of this, but I can answer to it. Basically, we need to have some sort of standard and framework for structuring the data, and also to know what is included, what is excluded. And these are different standards. That's very important in terms of calculation. And then in terms of trading, but also will involve some methods of verification, an acceptable sort of framework for verification. That's why a lot of the time these type of transactions, they are run by some third-party international organizations, but actually have these framework, understand all of these things, have some sort of a whole process of quality assurance, checking, due diligence, etc. And this is also where there's a bit of problem. There are a bit of problems because this means that there are fees associated to these sort of measurement and verification. But then as a solution, that could be something that's got to get devised by your country. So each country can have their own way of doing this thing without having to go to third-party international organization to certify, etc. So yeah, I think each country must be developing their own sort of standard and framework regarding how things are calculated, and all the different regulatory processes around exchange.
Definitely, yes. I think that's not something that is really widespread or existing by knowledge for carbon offset, because it's driven, of course, by new market and new stakeholders. Of course, it has its niche in the regulations and if it exists or not. For the moment, of course, a lot of startups, especially in the mobility sector, trying to get, for example, the carbon offset or the carbon credit, and then trying to do very complicated mechanism to have deduction or tax reduction in that sense. But of course, I joined Tony because it has to be in a certain way, of course, put on the table. It could be a great incentive, but at the same time, I'm based in Ireland. So in Ireland, we have this mechanism, but it's very, very little in terms of impact and utility. Still, of course, I would see that through the green, funding, and also the transition toward a more aspect, we can find, ways to establish in different African countries on a different scales.
All right, thank you for that thought. A lot of questions have been flying in there, and everybody keep asking, how do you get reliable data? Of course, for me, it's a matter of, it's like asking, how do you get a beautiful rice to eat? It's when you have rice that you can know a beautiful rice. I've had instances where I followed the Google map to a location, and at the end of the day, I discovered that where I went, or where I found myself, was a blocked road. However, have I stopped using Google Map from then? No, I haven't. So what it meant is that let's even look at how do we have data. Now, the reliability of data is also premised on how collective the data is being populated. I mean, we've had a lot of things in Nigeria that is done in some cocoon, everybody doing their own. And let me also add to this thought before we go to the next question. Now, when we talk about some of these conversations, it's not only to point out the problem. We're also pointing out that with the problem comes the solution. from the eater comes something sweet. From the problem come possible businesses. I mean, we are here talking about some green energy certificates. We're talking about carbon offset certificates. We're talking about green power. We never had. I'm not sure we have anyone that's ever benefited from West Africa. So and these are possible markets for professionals and even countries and councils. So we are not only pointing out the problem, we are also tearing our heart to see that with the problem comes the massive profit and massive possibility. Now, let me go to the maybe last question because our time is fast. We only have about 10 minutes remaining, if time permits us. Someone is asking here that while we are focusing on these data, are there measures that we can recommend that can allow some of our academias to put together, because the person's focus was more or less on the academias, that they do a lot of work, whereas we don't see some of those work translate to tangible impact in the society. Now, maybe with this question, let me also add the second question from Fatima Saka. She's asking that in the recent COP28, the parties agree upon reducing the global emission, of course, which is a welcome development, but Nigeria tends to disagree. Well, I don't know when they disagree. I know that some Nigerian delegates were there, and what I'm aware of is that they agree. Well, I'm not sure how the disagreement went. The person is asking is that what is the way forward for Nigeria? Well, this question, this question has also been partly answered. The first way forward is that when we talk about Nigeria, they are Nigerians. If Nigeria is aware of how a minor or a mini effort can translate to a mega effort, if you can start, that's why we're having this conversation. That's why we're having this knowledge series. It starts from knowledge. Anyway, of course, from what everybody has said, start from knowledge. So I will think that knowledge is the first point of call. I also think that we also need to define, I mean, I'm just learning from what we have learned in this presentation before we go to that question of research. I also remember that Isa mentioned about how we can redefine decarbonization in our own context. You know, we have a lot of context that is never applicable to West Africa or to Nigeria. Maybe while we have this conversation, we have to also come with an adaptable template that can define decarbonization within our local context that is suitable for our own building code. And again, we can also adapt the knowledge we have. I mean, gleaning from Mauritius, gleaning from Tunisia now, it gives us a mini perception to what they have done. Of course, you can get to know more by the time you see their slide or get to go on internet and check them out and check their works out. And again, she also stressed about younger people. And also finally, I remember she mentioned about innovation in academia. So I think within all of these, that might provide a way forward for Nigeria. So maybe I should just leave it there if there are other things to add. So the two questions now to be answered is what is the hope for Nigeria, one, and what can academia do more to make it kind of innovative to assess their data, knowing fully well that almost every day colleges in Nigeria, another part of West Africa and Africa churn out research, documentation, researchers in their thousands. What can we do? How can we get more innovative about this data? And what's the report for Nigeria? Again, if Engineer Diko is on this call, let him attempt it. And if he's not, I will actually move the question to Insaf, and afterwards I will let Tony also respond to the question. Then we'll start closing the session. Insaf, do you want to go ahead? If Engineer Diko is not on the call yet.
Yes, Emmanuel, can you help me again just by summarizing, because it was
okay. So there are two concerns here. Then the academia not being, you mentioned about innovation in academia. So someone's question is, how can we what are the innovation paths that you can follow that can make the data they are generating from their research accessible for execution and for project documentation in Nigeria? And again, of course, someone also raised the fact that at COP28, some of Nigeria delegates that he or she is aware of disagree with the pathway that was designed at the COP. Now he's asking what's way forward for Nigeria. So those are the two questions.
So I will go through directly, I mean, by practical things, like what is happening. I mean, it's a lot of you, how academia, let's say institutions, have been shifting toward what we call them action-based research. So this approach allows that through practical, real projects and pilot one, research is taking place at the same time. So this allows, of course, for more learning, experiences, but also innovation, because it includes within this action-based research, it includes at the same time different, let's say, actors, and it promotes intermediation of knowledge. When I say action-based, means that when we take, for example, the schools of architecture or urban planning and so on, many of them have been completely shifted toward more holistic, let's say, titles. It means that they not only focus on the building or focusing on the urban design or urban planning, but they take it more through the lenses of integrated development framework. So we have now today different professions called about vulnerabilities, other talk about local economy development. So we have more pluridisciplinarity, more, let's say, opportunities for learners and participants and students to work and to learn through action. The other aspect that we see, especially also in Tunisia, we have something called incubation within, laboratories in different university. That means that while the students are also undergoing their training and they're being prepared for their professional life, they are also having the opportunity to launch their first startup or to incubate their ideas and to be active member of their society. So you see the way through these two examples, I give you a hint about how, this change could happen. One is that we don't underestimate the role of academia in bringing really change, to not underestimate the fact that it doesn't have to be linear. It's a very multi-layered approach, means that we actually try to design possibilities. It's really about uncharted practices. It's more about everything. It's a little bit, many people talk here about problem solving, for instance. We think about challenges, problems, and so on, while in reality, we change the mindset toward a more positive approach, which is more towards vision and towards action. So yeah, this is for me coming from, also being trained as an architect and urban planner, but mainly in engineering for development, which bring different paradigms of planification. It shows how much the academia can play a role to prepare future leadership in how they work together, how they acknowledge different, disciplines, and how to be also have soft skills for negotiation, for management, for enduring, stress. And I think this is the key aspect within Africa, is the human factor. And this is something the change or the transition or the innovation couldn't happen if we don't put also the academia and the training within the core.
All right, thank you, Insaf. Yeah, Tony, do you want to have a chat question? And you can also
Yeah.
you can also give us your closing thoughts from there, because we have like 2 to 3 minutes to close this session.
Oh yeah, I think Insaf has answered it. It's regarding that, but on energy, I think also that a lot of innovation exists there, because energy has been a hot topic for many years, and I agree completely with Insaf regarding all the different skills, but the youth need to have going out in the world and also supporting them in terms of the initiatives. I think my closing thought would be more around putting things in context also. Your question that you mentioned comes like about COP28 and Nigeria not accepting. So I didn't really get that. But just to understand in terms of context, Africa emits about 3 to 4% of total global emission. So we are at 4% culprit in terms of global emission, out of which probably 60% comes from 3 countries only, which is South Africa, Egypt, and Algeria. And so yeah, there is an urgency for decarbonization, but we also need to put things in context. And when we talk about youth, when we talk about where we put our effort, like for example, for me, I mean that's just subjective to my own judgment. We need to fight climate change, but I'm more concerned, and that's why I always battle in terms of when we have these global policy think tanks where the discussion is a lot about mitigation. But for me, I said, we small island development states, we emit like 0.001%. I mean, yes, great to talk about mitigation and talk to our government about mitigation, but we're more worried about adaptation. For example, now we just had a cyclone, and the whole, I don't know if you've seen the news, and maybe you haven't, but there were like cars floating in the capital, people died, etc., just because of the torrential rain in the cyclone. So yeah, we will be putting our effort more into these things since resources are restrained, but that doesn't take out the importance of working on a decarbonization plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tony. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming. Okay, let me see. Would you want to give a closing thoughts?
I just want to say that it's a journey, and we have started the journey. It's a collaborative effort that all of us need to put our hands on deck. Every one of us, we are involved in this. The truth of the matter is climate change affects every one of us, and this is the time. They say that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, but the next best time is now. So we all need to put our hands on deck and join in the effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All hands to be on deck. Engineer Diko, do you just give us closing thoughts? Are you able to pick your call? Engineer Diko, can you hear me? Okay, so if he's not able to come to unmute, let's have Isaf give our closing thoughts, our closing remark. Isaf, can go ahead.
Sorry.
There you
Sorry,
go.
were you talking to me?
Yes, okay. Yes, I was talking to you. Can you just give your closing remark? We're about closing the session.
Okay.
The webinar is coming to an end in a few minutes from now. Please, can you just give your closing remark?
I would like to say thank you for the platform to share what we've been doing and our thoughts around decarbonization going forward. I'd like to thank my other panelists for their insightful presentations and moving information that they have. I'd like to thank the participants for listening to us and their questions. Thank you so much.
So Engineer Diko, why we're hearing you is a question that actually came that I was hoping you can speak to. Of course, that's not part of your closing remark. Someone is asking the transactions within the carbon space. How do we get to benefit from it as Nigerians? I know in some developed economies, they talk about some green energy certificate, they talk about carbon offset certificate, they talk about renewable energy certificate, they talk about purchasing green powers. Some also talk about some sort of cradle-to-cradle certifications for installations. Now, are you able to guide in this within Nigeria space? Again, do we have your organization, your company, translating some of your installations in rural environment into a tangible? That's a tangible installation. Is there any way you get it converted to some tradable commodity or tradable certificate. It's of importance to us because really while we invest in the knowledge, we also want to know where the money is. So can you just comment on this as we step out of this session?
All right. So I'd like to give a response. So one thing you have to realize with the market is that unfortunately the Nigerian carbon trading market is not really active. And unfortunately, this is not within the purview of our agency or our parent ministry. It is the purview of, I think, the Ministry of Environment and the National Council for Climate Change. What normally happens is that this market sets the standards.
Okay.
My general understanding is that usually brownfield projects are difficult, have difficulty accessing this market. Or even if you do, you get a much lower value for your carbon emissions because what they find is that it's very difficult to measure the emission. Therefore, they're not valued as much. However, if there is a market, both national and international, and you're able to sign up on your green project, your measurements and verification of your mitigation or your carbon displacement, then you are able to get tangible revenues from that project. So this is the caveat. The things like that are an option, but one has to think about it properly right from project development. Usually trying to do it after your project has been developed is quite tedious and may not think about a lot of financial. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, that does. Thank you very much. I mean, with what you have just said, what it meant to me, and I'm sure to other persons in the seminar, is to say that there's opportunity because a lot of things are yet to be defined. So maybe the next thing to work on. I mean, we've had a lot of knowledge brokering conversation. We've had a lot of soft skills, human factor conversation. We've had a lot of basic gap conversation. We've had a lot of how do we define decarbonization within our local context. I mean, how do we adapt it? How do we innovate within the academia? So it only was in fact that the pathway we want to tow is like a very, very green pathway. Is we have to really do a lot of work to really profit within the space and also achieve the goal that we set as a country and globally. So let me also have the closing remark and final thoughts from Insaf. Thank you, Insaf, for coming. You have the floor now.
Very much for everyone and for the people who
can you speak up a bit?
Sorry?
Can you speak up a bit? I'm not sure we're hearing you clearly.
You, the speaker.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yes, so I would say, I was saying that thank you for everyone for these opportunities and for those who attend this webinar. My final remarks would be that we need really to focus, each one of us as professionals, to continue our capacity building and to develop our skills, to address at the same time our fellows and colleagues, and to work collaboratively. So to really reach out to global, green councils and different coalitions that exist where we practice. The other thing is to be able to look closer to the narrative, to the local narrative, and to really drive the engagement of the different actors to be able also to drive demand for decarbonization. Another aspect is that even though we are maybe in the private sector, is to try to support the different, public institutions in their mission to create, a regulatory framework and to implement them, and also to facilitate the different actions that they are planned to happen towards the decarbonization. So thank you very much and good luck for all the amazing efforts and projects that you are undergoing, and looking forward for next opportunities to to debate and to exchange knowledge.
Thank you so much, Insa, for your time and for your great insight. I want to, on behalf of the Green Building Council of Nigeria, celebrate and appreciate our panelists. Thank you for joining us in this great conversation. Thank you to the President and other board of directors. Closing this session for me, I will just reiterate some things I've learned. I've learned about how we need